Hello everybody, welcome back to our channel. Here we share beginner-friendly coding tutorials on Scratch, Roblox, Minecraft, web programming, and many more. Today we're going to create a web survey form. In this project, I'll teach you how to make a web online survey form that asks the user about their recycle habits. This project will use HTML and CSS. We'll also teach you input types such as submit buttons, radio buttons, checkboxes, and text boxes. There's also a template below in the description to follow along. So let's get started. So I've opened up the template from the description below in my codepen.io. And here we can see the basic structure of our website. We have two field sets. The first field set asks for the personal information like first name, last name, email, and phone number, while the second field set asks the recycling habits that the user has. And here are the different types of inputs and different types of questions that are provided for us. So we'll begin by looking at the first field set for the personal information and adding text boxes so that user can put in their own information here. So below first name for our label, let's add a text box. And here we can write input type and input specified that this whole div is going to be a text box. And so we can use input tag for a text box. So here we can have input and the type of the input will be text because we're expecting text coming in as first name. We're given an ID of first name. So I will write F and then name, indicating first name. And I'll also give this input an ID and a name called first name as well. So F name. And then I'll add a small break so that the next field will be pushed to the next line. So here I'll add a break. That. So here, as you can see in our templates, that we have added a text box right next to first name. So let's do the same for the other ones. Here, for the last name, I'm going to add once again another text box. And the tag for text box is again input. Here we're expecting text again for last name, similar to first name. So here we're going to say types equals text. For ID, I'm going to give it the ID of last name. So here I'm going to write L name, stands for last name. And I'm also going to give it the same name of L name. And again, I'm going to add two breaks to give us some room in our survey. And here for emails, again, we're going to use a text box. So here we write inputs. For the type, however, email actually have their own type. So we can write type as email. And now we do ID, which we can just write email and set a name for this text box, which is also be email. And again, we add two breaks to separate the fields. So here we have first name, text box, last name text box, email text box, and then lastly phone number. So again, we have a text box for a phone number. So here we write inputs, indicating it's a text box. Type, again, we just want text for this. So we write text. The ID, let's give it an ID of phone number with a capital N and no spaces in between. And the name, we'll use the same name as the ID again. So it will be phone number. And again, we're just going to add two breaks so that it'll be easier for the user to identify between the text boxes. And now if you look at our demo in the bottom, you see that we have text boxes next to all the personal information. Now let's take a look at the second field set of our website, which asks our user their recycling habits. So the first question that we have under here, as you can see for the label for recycle habits, is how often do you recycle? And here we want to give the user a couple of options. So the first option we will give is daily. Second is going to be monthly. We can also give them weekly and then maybe not sure. So there will be 4 choices for the user and they can only pick one. In this case, we want to use the type radio buttons, which will only allow users to select one of the options that are given. So here underneath our line 19 here, how often do you recycle? let's go down and start writing our code. So here we're again asking for inputs. So let's type in inputs. And for the type, instead of text or email like before, where it will provide us a text box, let's write type to be radio. And let's set the ID to the corresponding value for each option. So the first option I'm going to give is daily. So if the ID for the first one should be called daily. And I'm going to assign it a name. And the name here should be related to the question that is being answered. So here we're asking about how often you recycle. So I'm just going to write recycle. And the value again should be the same as ID, which in our case for the first one will be daily. So after we gave them the option to select this button, daily, we don't actually know that this button is daily. As you can see, there's nothing that states that it is daily. So let's go underneath and give it a label. So here we can type label, and we can type it for daily. And here we can set the word inside to be daily. And we can close the label and add a break. So now let's go back and see. Now we have a checkbox with the daily option right next to it. Now let's give it a second option. Here again, I'm gonna write input and type of radio. And here the ID is gonna be weekly. This is the second option that we will give the user. And the name again is gonna be recycle, since this is still part of the same question. And the value will be equal to weekly. And here again, we're gonna have label for weekly. And here we can just write weekly so that the user can see. Close the label, and again, add a break. As you can see now, we have daily and weekly. Let's add the other two options we have real quick. For the third option we have, again, all of these are going to be radio, or type of radio. And then the third option we have is monthly. So here we can set ID equals to monthly. And the name again should be recycle, since we're answering the question for recycle. And the value should be set equal to the ID, which in our case is monthly. And again, let's add a label so the user knows what that button is for. So we set a label for monthly, and whoops, and in there we'll write monthly. Close the label and add a break. So you see now we have monthly as the third option. The last option is not sure. So here again, we're gonna write inputs type of radio. ID just gonna write not sure. Name is gonna be recycle, and made a typo up here. The name field should always be in string, so you always need the double parameters to quote around the words. So here name should be inside the quote recycle, and the value should be equal to not sure, same as the ID. And like we have done before, and I've just realized again I've made more typos. Here it should be label, not label. So yep, can't spell. So label. Here label for not sure. Here we can just write not sure. Close the label and break. So as you can see, most of these are actually behind the camera, so we actually can't see the ID, the name, or the value of these buttons, but we can see the label. So whatever you put in here should correspond to the answer that if they click on this. So yeah, that is our first question. How often do you recycle? And we have given them 4 options. All right, so now that we have looked at text and email for text boxes, as well as radio buttons, which only allows us to select one, let's take a look at the third field, which is the second question in our recycling habits. Here, the question is, what materials do you recycle? Tick all applicable. So all of these that are applicable by the user should be selected. So here we want to have multiple selection if possible. And as you can see in um, the templates here, the code for all the options and questions are included. However, the type of the input is missing. So here, since we know that more than one option is possible, we want to use the checkbox option. So here in the input type, we're gonna write checkbox like this, and we're gonna write it for all of these input types. So here for input type, I'm gonna write checkbox. And if you really want, you can copy and paste them into the checkbox, as every one of these will have um, type of checkbox for the inputs. So here, as you see inputs type, you just put in checkbox in here. Okay, awesome. So I've put checkbox for the types for all of these inputs. And now if I just go down, you can see that I can select any one of these and just unselect it by clicking it again. Cool. Okay, so now looking at um, the third question that we have under here an obstacles. What obstacles, if any, keep you from recycling? Circle all that applies. In this case, we know that we should use checkbox because more than one of the field could be selected. Um, Here, however, in the templates, we are not provided any solutions. So we can simply copy this format with the input type checkbox, given ID, a name, and a value, and then the label for this. And so I'll go over a couple of examples for any reasonable answer. But here you guys can put in your own answer if you want. If you have any kind of ideas on what people might say, then or might pick, then you can put that as an option. Here, I'm gonna put my first option, and here I'm gonna set the input type to checkbox. It's gonna have ID called no bins. In this case, my reasoning is gonna be I don't have a bin. So here the ID is gonna correspond to the answer once again. So ID is gonna be no bins. And I can say obstacle, the name will be obstacle because that is the answer I'm trying to, that is the question I'm trying to answer. I mean, and here the value would be again the same as the ID, which is no bins. After this, I should create a label. The label should be for no bins. So here the label for should be including the ID. Here and then inside of the label, I'll just write no bins are available. Close off the label and add a break. As you can see, I've added no bins are available. Let's add one more or a couple more just so you guys can see what kind of um, things we're doing, and then you guys can replicate and just kind of write your own ID and your own reasoning below. So it's fine if you have more than 2 or 3 options. You can have as many options as you want as long as they're all valid. Here, I'm going to say bins full. This is another reason. Name, again, is going to be obstacle. And the value is going to be, again, bins full, same as the ID. Let's create the label for bin is full. So bins full. And inside the label, we'll just say bins are full. And close the label and add a break. So as you can see, we have our second checkbox ready to go. So I actually have gone ahead and added 4 more options. So the first option I have added without behind the scene is unsure. So I said unsure if products are recyclable. Here again, we have checkbox being our type, ID being unsure, name being obstacles, and value being ID. The second one I've added is too much time consuming or too much time is needed. So too much time consuming or too time consuming. The third option is we don't know where to recycle. And the fourth option is that we don't care about recycling. So in total, we have 6 options now. So including the 2 that we did on camera, now we have 6 options. And yeah, So they have the same parameters in terms of type and name, but the ID and value, which is the same, should correspond to the individual answers that we have. So here are the some of the ideas for you to pick as an answer. So now let's look down at our next question. Here we have, do you have any recycling collection points where you live? And here we are actually given a selection of 4 options. And here we don't actually have all 4 options yet, as you can see. And in the drop bar, you can just see that there are 4 options available, but none of them actually are filled in because we haven't filled in the option values here. Um, so we want to keep the first option as error, just in case the user don't have an answer for us. Here we can start writing our other options that the user can pick. The first option I'm going to write is not sure. Second option is probably yes, and then followed by no. So I'll give the user 3 different choices. It's going to be not sure, yes, and no. Or they can just pick nothing. In this case, it would be the error. So let's do not sure first. So value of not sure, and inside here, we can just write not sure. So the user knows that this option for not sure. Now let's do yes. So I'll just write the value as yes. And in the text, I'll write yes. So the user knows this corresponds to the answer yes. And lastly, we have no. And again, we're going to put no in here. And now you see that we have filled up the 4 options. And if you go down to this question and we go to selection, we can see that yes, no, and not sure is a part of our selection. So now we have 3 more questions, which is what types of bag does your family use for shopping, and do you believe recycling is important? And any general comments about the recycling program. So for the first 2 fields, we see that we should be able to select one options because here is asking for what type of bag. So we should only be able to select one. And here, do you believe recycling is important? Again, we should only be able to select one option because you cannot have 2 opinions on the same thing. So here in our first question that we looked at, what type of bag does your family use for shopping? We know that since we can only select one option, we should use the radio type again. So here for the type, I'm gonna write radio. All right. And here for input type, I'm gonna write radio again. Radio. And here, this is a second question. Do you believe recycling is important? Again, we want to use the radio type for the input. So radio, radio. And now if we look down, we can select one of the option, but not all of them, just like we wanted. And a quick spot at some typo actually from the templates. We see that here it says input type ID is plastic. However, we put the label for paper, and here we have the label for paper and the actual label of plastic. So let's just switch that real quick. It's not a big deal. So here, instead of paper, we should have a label for plastic. And instead of the label saying paper, we'll say plastic. And here, the label should be for paper. And the label should also say paper. And let's just add the label type here, reusable bag. Again, this label 4 should match the ID above. And again, we'll just do the label 4 here real quick. Awesome. And quickly, here are actually our second question does not contain the label 4. So here we're just gonna write the label. And here, remember that the name corresponds to the label that we use for the question. So here, recycle important is the name. So here we're gonna say label 4, recycle important. I just copy and paste this name over here. And so for the last question, again, we're gonna need to pull in the label for the actual question, which will be the same as the name. Here's general comments. So we can just write general comments and make sure it's spelled the same way as the name. And lastly, for the input type, we just want the user to be able to type something. So here we want them to have some kind of text box. So we can just write text indicating text box. And yeah, so now we have our questions and the um, options or answers formatted correctly. And we can move on to the CSS part of this project. And actually, before we move to CSS, we're missing one key component, which is the submit button. As you see, we're almost complete with our HTML. We have all the fields and all the selection for the user. However, we do not have a submit button. So there's no way for the user after filling out the forms to submit it. So at the bottom here, let's add a button for submit. So here we have inputs, and for the type, it's gonna equal to submit. This is the submit button. And the value, we're gonna set it to submit as well. And on the bottom, we'll just add breaks. And then we can write a link. Here, the link will just be empty for now. And we can write show survey results after submitting form /a, and we can put the link so that the user can see their submission or the result in here inside of this A. And now when we save it, we see that we have a submit button as well as a link that will point our user to the results of the survey. All right, let's move to the CSS part. So in the CSS part, the first thing I'm going to do is import some fonts from the Google API. So to import something, we can do @import. Here we're going to include the URL where the API is called, and inside of it, we're going to put the link of the API. Here we're going to have this URL that will call and get the Montserrat font for us, which is what we wanted. Now let's style our website. Here, let's just style our overall body to begin with. First, I want my body to have a background color so that it's not plain white. And let's set a light green color, similar to the environment and following the recycling theme here. Next, let's turn the color for text to black. And let's add margin to automatic so that we can have more space and more, or it seems more spacious. Next, let's make the text aligned to be justified. And let's set the font weight to be bolder. Like that. And let's set the fonts family to the fonts we imported, which is Montserrat. And we're just going to use sans serif, like that. And now we can start styling our link at the bottom here. So go down, we can style the link, which is A, under the tag A, and we can set it with a color of 0000 EE. So 4 zeros and 2 E's, and this will highlight it blue. Now let's do our CSS on our field sets. So here I'm gonna write field sets. And let's add the background color to begin with. And here I'm going to use this tag called F9, FA, FC. So this is a tag for the color. And it's pretty beige white. And you'll go over the green background that we have for the body. Next, let's add some margin top. And we add 2% to the margin top. Let's again add some margin to the left now. And we'll put 10% for margin left. And now we also add margin bottom. Here we add 3%. And then we add a width for this field set, and we'll set the width to be 70%. So now you see that we have kind of lessened the size of this field set and centralized it a little bit more. Next, we're going to add a WebKit border. So here we're going to say WebKit border dash radius. The radius we're going to have is 8 pixels. And now let's also add this Mo's border. And we set the radius for this also to 8 pixels. And now we'll just add, in case none of these work, we add just a normal border here, called 8 pixels again. So now you can see we have a little border on our field set. And now let's take a look at these titles. Here, as you can see in our HTML, we have it underneath the tag legend. So let's format legend and to change the recycling habits and personal information text. So here we'll type legend. I'll begin by starting to change the background color, and I'll change it to purple. Next, I'll change the text to white. And I'll also add a padding on 5 pixel on the top and right, and 10 pixel on the left and bottom. Right? And I'll also give an order of solid, 1 pixel, and the color black. Awesome. Now again, I would do something similar with the border. Here I'll add a web. Here the WebKit should have a dash here. I add a WebKit border of radius. Again, we add 8 pixels. And if that doesn't work, we'll try most border slash radius. Again, we have 8 pixels. And if that again doesn't work, I'll add just a normal border of radius of 8 pixels. And finally, I'm just going to add padding of 6 pixel on every side to give it a little bit more room. I see our legend text is formatted nicely. So the last two minor things we have to do for CSS is the input and the title. So here, let's do the inputs real quick. For inputs, all we're adding is a margin of 5 pixels. And for the title, which we have labeled as using an ID, so we have to identify it using an ID. ID of title, let's add a margin of top from 30 pixels. Set the text to centralize by setting text align to center. And now increase the size of the font by setting the font size to 30. Awesome. So now if you just take a look at our website, as you can see, we have our 2 field sets with each questions and text box. And here you can select options and whatnot. And then we have a submit button. So yeah, that is the whole project. So that's all for today. In today's tutorial, we learned to make a simple web survey form. We made use of HTML to structure the different input types, like radio buttons, submit buttons, text boxes, and checkboxes. We also use CSS to design our question elements. Feel free to make any changes to the website as you see fit. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to check out the next section of this project. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you, and bye-bye.